finance. Local authorities, NHS, blue light universities and schools to realise their digital transformation projects. Our in-house products, including our leading asset management solution, TESMA, extend beyond finance with solutions that support you at every stage of your life cycle. Let's face it, we know that digital transformation is a hot topic, and it can be overwhelming for organisations to know where to begin. Budgets are being squeezed. Hybrid working is now embedded within office culture, and the onset of AI and automation is driving real change in technology. Our discussion today will be focused more specifically around the topic of IT procurement and how to ensure that your solutions are both best value and sustainable. We've got a fantastic panel of speakers joining us to share some key insights into this topic and hopefully leave us all better informed as to whether we should review our procurement process. I'm joined by Ben Tung, who's the Digital Net Zero lead for NHS England. I've got Ola Fagerstrom, who is the Device Sustainability Specialist for Microsoft. I've got Kurt Frary, who's Head of IT for Norfolk County Council. Daryl Slevin, who's Director of Client Solutions at Link. And then finally, Emma Strong, who's the Senior Account Manager from CHG Meridian. So a couple of housekeeping points. As you can see, we've got a fantastic set of panelists. There are going to be lots of opportunities for not just our panelists to express their thoughts and opinions, but for you as well. On your screen to the right, you should see a question icon. So please feel free to ask questions during the presentation. If we are able to ask the question to our panelist when it comes in, we will. If we're not able to answer the question in the time that we've got, then we will take that away and we will come back to you and respond individually. With that in mind, let's bring our panelists into the conversation. Okay, so Ben, if I start with you, what role do you see IT playing in your sustainability goals to reach net zero?
Thanks very much for the question. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Brilliant. Yeah, so first of all, a quick intro from me. I'm the Digital Net Zero lead in NHS England, heading up the digital work stream of the Greener NHS programme, the Health System Sustainability Programme. I'm a career sustainability professional, chartered environmentalist. I've been working in sustainable tech for the last 5 years or so and been a core part of the cross-government STAR community that's looking at driving sustainable tech initiatives across the public sector. This question sort of encapsulates the work that my team does. What role do you see IT playing in your sustainability goals to reach net zero? So I'm just going to give you like a very high level kind of whistle-stop tour of the kind of stuff that we're thinking about, and then leave the other presenters to get stuck into the detail in some of those areas. If that works, I think it should hopefully make a nice shape for the session. So I think firstly, we just need to think about the problem. So climate change is here now. We need rapid decarbonisation of the circa 7.5% of carbon tied up in digital ICT and comms globally. But we also need to be pragmatic and recognise the need for climate change resilience. The Guy's and St Thomas's data centre outages of last year and the 40-degree heat wave shining a light on the fact that as a society, we're reliant on digital, but it's not always going to work. So we need to make sure that it's as reliable as possible. The climate crisis is also a public health crisis. So it's going to increase burden on the health system generally, but disproportionately impact vulnerable parts of society, so lead to health inequality as well. So how can we map some of those more kind of social elements of the sustainability agenda into our digital service design is a really important question. The Greener NHS is the NHS system-wide response to the climate problem. we have a target of achieving net zero by 2045, 5 years ahead of government timescales. And we also factor in climate change adaptation and resilience as well. And that's all legally binding now since the publication of the Health and Social Care Act last year. So it's in statute that we have to deliver against those targets. So it's important to recognise, though, that digital is obviously can be part of the solution as well as the problem. So yes, there's 7.5% of the carbon is tied up in digital, but on balance, well-managed digitisation releases a whole plethora of benefits: efficiency improvements, productivity improvements, connected people and societies, etc. So we would hope that well-managed digitisation would create net carbon benefit when factoring in both the costs and benefits into a sort of single calculation, looking at a change. And that's the approach that we're taking, largely speaking, when looking at NHS digitisation. Another consideration when looking at how to choose the way that you're doing things is to think about the embodied carbon perspective. So much of this net zero discussion is obviously around carbon. Within ICT devices, if you think about the stuff that you've generally got or using, so that might be laptops or tablets, smartphones, those kind of things, circa 80 to 90% of the carbon is embodied in the manufacturing of that device. So it becomes a really big question: is how do we better use the devices we've got, get longer lifetimes out of them, cascade them for different purposes, all kinds of stuff that would be badged up as a circular economy approach to ICT devicing, which is a big push for us. And there's some amazing statistics out there, like I read I think it was in How Bad Are Bananas by Mike Berners-Lee, there was a quote in there that you'd need to use a smartphone for 34 years for it to have the same carbon from the electricity it was drawing out of the wall as the carbon that's been created from manufacturing it in the first place, which is quite a striking number, isn't it, given that we generally replace them sort of 2 or 3 year cycles. So these kind of facts and quirky little figures like that, I think, can really help us with getting other people who are new to this topic thinking about it. We have a number of obligations that we have to work to here, not just the Health and Social Care Act. We've got the Technology Code of Practice, Sustainability Principle, that maps into spend controls. We've got Green in Government, ICT and Digital Services Strategy as part of the Green in Government commitments. And we've got the public procurement notes that have come out from Cabinet Office, social value and net zero being relevant here, which will directly change the way that procurements are happening. And hopefully some of the other presenters can talk about that a bit. But we've recently drafted some digital category guidance for social value, which is the 10% of scoring on larger procurement activities, which has to go towards good things that don't normally get factored into procurements, including obviously net zero. So this is really important. How do we work towards these obligations? And we've generally taken a life cycle approach here. So looking at the governance flow from business cases, spend controls, funding requirements, commercial activities, risk management, these kind of things. And much of the work that my team's done is developing tooling that lands in these different steps of the life cycle process for getting things done in big digital projects. But we've also set good practice for the broader health system as well. So we've got some sustainable tech considerations in the What Good Looks Like framework, which is how we'd hope the whole NHS to look at digitisation. And we're also developing a number of greener digital basics blueprints for the system on things like auto power down, low carbon web searching, buying remanufactured, swapping out hard disk drives for solid state drives, a whole number of stuff. And that's really to help kind of people just get their heads around the first steps that they could make in this area. And there's other obvious ways in, like things like good data management as well, not keeping stuff forever, because there's something like the amount of data we keep as a world is doubling every 18 months at the moment. So, that's a really important question. There's a really burgeoning sustainability tech practitioner scene at the moment. If you're interested in this topic, go and reach out to climateaction.tech or the Green Software Foundation. There's loads and loads of people globally getting involved in this. And we've got some good best practice case studies already coming through around live carbon benefits tracking on some of our projects. We're looking at one related to the NHS app at the moment. lighter weight desktops as well, allowing product lifetime extension with laptops and things, and low carbon web design. We're also pump priming the system as well to help some of the integrated care systems and their umbrella of bodies that they're working to start to think about greener digital as a concept. But we do come back to this supply chain levers. It's so crucially important because of the fact that most of the stuff that happens digitally is either software or hardware products that have been procured. Very little is built in-house, really. So how we start to map that into that and set hard requirements and specifications is going to be a massive question. There are shortcuts like TCO certified or EPEATS, like standards for ICT hardware products, so you can buy sustainable very easily, which does make it easier. And then just to flip over the climate coin quickly, as I referenced in my very first statement, climate risk is a real hidden vulnerability for us as society in terms of digital. The World Environment Forum puts climate risk as the top risks in 10 years' time. The UK Climate Change Committee has highlighted energy security as a near-term risk. And that's actually been a really interesting proxy exercise that government's undertaken recently off the back of the Ukraine energy security issues. There's been a proxy climate risk management thought exercise, really, about what would we do if the power switched off. But it's really complicated due to the web of interdependencies with other critical national infrastructure. So it becomes a very complicated area. And the recent parliamentary inquiry into the climate resilience of critical national infrastructure doesn't make very happy reading. So, we do need to be having this in mind, as well as this kind of chain of connectivity that we rely on for our digital services to run. So a third-party hosted digital service has a data flow from a cloud hoster through networks of various sizes through to end users and then maybe back again. So, and you need that whole system to be working for the digital service to function and to carry out its societal benefit. So trying to kind of understand where the biggest vulnerabilities lie is where we're trying to get our heads around at the moment. I'm very interested in anyone who'd like to collaborate on that type of thing, as anything else that I've mentioned. And then finally, just to kind of round off, I think sadly, too often sustainability is still an opt-in. It's not something that when it comes to the crunch is a mandated requirement in the way that many of us would like it to be. So there's a big challenge about how do we get sustainable tech on a par with other digital service design characteristics like cybersecurity, information governance, accessibility, user-centered design, interoperability, all these other things that are seen as kind of must-dos. And that needs resourcing, it needs support, and it's how can we be greener by design is the big question that I think we need to start to answer. So hopefully that's been an interesting intro to the rest of the session.
No, that has been absolutely perfect, Ben, and almost as though it was meant to be. It does lead us on to Ola. Now, before I introduce Ola, I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that we do have some live polls running. We will have 4 live polls running through the session. Each one will relate to topics in question. So I can already see that over 60% of the responders so far believe that with net zero in mind, is your organisation looking to move to a circular IT procurement approach? 67% of you have agreed yes, have plans and actions in place. So it's really, really useful. Ola, I know you've been listening to Ben's comments. I know that a lot of those are absolutely with you and Microsoft. So from a manufacturer point of view, what have you seen are the biggest changes, and what are Microsoft doing in adapting their products to address climate change?
Yeah, first of all, very inspiring to hear Benjamin talk about this, and also very much acknowledge what he's saying, that we need to make sure that this gets on the top of the agenda. It becomes really a requirement for everyone. But first, short about myself. My name is Ola Fagerström, based in Sweden. I've been working for Microsoft now for almost 12 years and been leading a lot of the sustainability work that we do around our devices for the last 3-4 years, and helping developing some of the tools that we actually see go live now. Going back to your questions, what is Microsoft's thinking in this, and what are we actually doing? So if I start with first, what is Microsoft? First, Microsoft had put up some really high goals in a few areas, and that is sort of that what we put down to everything else that we do. So with that, what we say as Microsoft is that we want to be a carbon negative organization by 2030. We also put up the goal that we want to be water positive and then a zero waste organization. So those three things, and then the additional one is that we want to help and understand the planet by building what we call the planetary computer. But when we're thinking about carbon negative, water positive, and zero waste, that is something that's guiding everything that we do. Because how we're doing it is that making sure that we build that in to all our products and services, making sure that we do this together with our customers and partners. But the core of all of those things is as well to making sure that all employees are a part of this. Because regardless if you are inside Microsoft or in any other organizations, there are very few people that has sustainability as their core job or in their job title. By making sure that everything we do, you as an end user can also feel that you're doing something. So that's why we also see that we want to build a leading platform to help and tackle all those sustainability, environmental challenges that we have out there, and we really need to do it together. With that overall goal as Microsoft, my part is more focused on the Windows and Surface side, the Surface, the computers that are built by Microsoft. What we have said from our side is that we, of course, when we already design something, we need to think of how do we design it to make sure that we design already from the beginning out as much carbon emissions as possible. Making sure that our supply chain is actually transforming to use renewable energy. The second part is making sure that when we design it, we already design with circularity in mind, to making sure that we use increased reparability for our devices. And then lastly, making sure that we do all of this with transparency, because it's super important if we are going to meet the targets that we as Microsoft have put up, or you as a customer have put up. You need to make sure that you can rely and get the data from us as a supplier. Coming back to what Benjamin talked about before, where you might see that 70 to 80% or even higher comes from the embedded carbon that comes when you're actually manufacturing it. So that means that we have to make sure that we can actually show you what is the impact when we are actually manufacturing something. And one of the key things that we have invested a lot in is making sure that when we are actually building something, we are collecting the data directly from our own supply chain. When we are then doing what's called life cycle assessments, which is basically the calculation of seeing what is the environmental impact of whatever it is that you build. By making sure that we collect the data from our supply chain, which is called primary data, then we can also make sure that we understand what is the impact, but we could also then easily make sure that our customers actually understand the impact. So a key thing for this is making sure that we as Microsoft have our house in order and understanding what is the impact from the things that we do, if that's building a PC or if it's building a software or a service, and then making sure that our customers can understand and use that data to, again, making sure that you understand your full supply chain and what is the impacts of that. Because it will be extremely difficult for any customer to meet any kind of target if they can't rely on the data that they get from their suppliers or from their supplier's supplier. So that is one of the core things that we're doing now, and we're going to publish a new white paper in upcoming weeks, which will talk about the even refinement that we have done in our life cycle assessments. Today, we are using a bit over 50% comes from our own measurements directly from our supply chain. In the near future, that will go up even higher. If I'm looking at the broader industry, those numbers are very, very low. So if I go back to the number that Benjamin talked about before, that could be 70 or 80%. But I also say, go and be bold and ask any of your suppliers, what is the carbon impact of that product that you want to sell to me? Is that number actually based on your own measurements and coming from your own supply chain? Or are you just using a simplified tool to give me some high-level numbers? Because if there are just some high-level numbers, how are you then over time going to make sure that you can follow up that and making sure that you meet your numbers? The other thing is also making sure that we getting into that circularity. And that's also, of course, making sure that the thing that you purchase, it's actually repairable and has actually spare parts for it. So one of the things that we have done from the Surface side is making sure that you can actually download service guides for our devices where you can look up yourself, how can I actually repair this? And you can actually order your spare parts from the reseller. But it also means that you can involve you as an end user with that. So they can actually do it even though the device is under warranty. But what we have also said from the Surface side is you are actually allowed to change those components and it will still be under warranty. So you don't break the warranty and you don't need to be a certified technician to change those components, which again, putting us into that circularity. And the last one is, of course, when we are designing our devices, we want to do it with material that will withstand long use and that they will look fantastic over years of time. And we hear it directly when I talk to Emma and we talk about residual value of a device, where it clearly stands out that there are two brands that's leading this market. It's Apple and it's us. Because again, if you talk about circularity, what is the easiest way to get into that? Making sure that the thing that you purchase actually has some sort of residual value. Because when you are done with it, or when your end users want to have a new device, making sure that you can sell it. Because if something has a high value, you probably also making sure that it will get sold over and over again. Because again, if it has no value, the end user probably won't care and just will throw it in the bin and it will just end up as e-waste. Versus something with a high value will be used over and over again. So long answer, and I hope that clarifies a little bit on how we are thinking about it from the Microsoft side.
No, and fantastic insight in there. And obviously from a Microsoft side, we've seen lots of evidence of all of the work that you are putting in, and also the sustainability calculator that you've actually got for these for this data. Obviously, Ben, Ola, thank you. Your views on the sustainability aspect have been fantastic. I'm going to hand over to Kurt, because obviously sustainability has been a hot topic for quite some time. What we're seeing now is AI and automation coming into the frame. So Kurt, for yourself, AI and automation has been probably the most significant advancement in IT, in the IT sector. So how prepared do you think councils are, and how important is it to keep up-to-date technology and practices to ensure that the communities that you serve are actually feeling the benefits?
Well, thank you for that question. That's quite an interesting question. You know, I don't go a day now, a day doesn't go by without someone mentioning AI, the opportunity or the threat. And I even posted on LinkedIn this morning about, you know, a poll, you know, is AI an opportunity or a threat? So I'm Kurt Frary. I'm head of IT at Norfolk County Council, a large rural county in the east of England. And I provide services for Norfolk County Council, Great Yarmouth Borough Council and Norfolk Fire and Rescue. But I'm also the Vice President of SOCTIM, the Society for Innovation, Technology and Modernisation. So I have quite a broad reach in the public sector, meeting people, making connections and understanding what's going on. And the question about AI and automation is right up there with the risk of security and threats that we face across the public sector. So we've done the discussion about working from home, haven't we? I'm at home today. We've done the discussion about printing and saving money around there and reducing our print to save the planet, all of those things. But actually, in terms of the current landscape, we have a number of new challenges and questions, really, which all relate to AI and automation and the way we deliver our services in the public sector. So the challenges I'm going to call out today are, you know, interest rates rising. So we've got, so capital is more expensive to us. Revenue, we have to make savings because the public purse is tight. And that's the money that we spend on new technologies, of course. And if we go to deliver digital services, we need to embrace these new technologies as they come along. So when AI and automation is on the agenda, the first question is, you know, can we use it? Should we use it? And the second question is, how much does it cost? They're the big questions that come out. But really, the actual question is, are they something we should be doing? Is it an opportunity? Is it something that can help deliver public services more, so we can provide more to the people we're trying to support and serve? And can we do more with less? So for me, the answer is yes, we should be embracing AI in the public sector, but in the right way. So there's things we need to think about. The public are using AI out of work as well as in work. They're starting to get familiar with it. You know, products like ChatGPT and the new Bing search from Microsoft, they all do things that we haven't been able to do before. And if when the internet started and people started searching, we said, oh, we're not going to embrace that technology, you can't use it, where would we be? You know, we could block the search. So people are asking us, do we block ChatGPT? Do we stop people using it? Well, absolutely not. What you need to do is embrace it in the right way. So there's a number of things that we need to be reminding people when we take on this technology. The first is, be careful what you put into it, be aware of what you're putting into it. And secondly, you need to own the output. You need to check it's factually correct. You need to make sure that you're happy with the output, and you need to own it. So if it's like writing anything in some of the tools, like the Microsoft tools like Word, if you write something down, you wouldn't just send a random letter with stuff from the internet you've found and send to someone, would you? So that's the same with the AI technology. But the truth of the thing around this is, look, we're all on a learning curve on this in the public sector. It is new technology. We are starting to understand what we need to be careful of and what we can embrace, but it also has massive potential. Now, the potential starts with staff that can help them with their day-to-day jobs. Like in many organizations, it can help them create documents and research stuff and provide things really quickly, which can reduce staff time. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it can help us make decisions. Where we've got large amounts of data, we can automate the process of collecting it and issuing it, but we can also apply AI to help us with decisions and inform us better. And obviously we'll need to own those decisions and make an exception process if possible, because there are ethical concerns from some people around, if we're making decisions about people's lives, should we be using AI to do that, and should we have a process for people to then challenge that? And thirdly, there's the interaction with the people we're trying to help. You know, AI, you've seen the large language models, the ChatGPTs of this world, where they use natural language to interpret things that people are saying to provide answers. Well, that absolutely could be something that we could use across the public sector to interact with the people we're trying to help. But the people who say the naysayers or throw out words of caution around this are right as well. I'll give you a couple of examples that happened recently. The first one is if credit card companies, for instance, if you've got a credit card you use on holiday, and that allows you to have reduced cost transactions abroad. So it happened to me recently. I went to an airport. I went to pay for the baggage that I needed to pay for. I got a travel credit card that allows me to use it abroad, and it was blocked. So the AI, the automation that detects whether you're using your card fraudulently for a travel card, blocked it for when I used it abroad. So there are problems with the technology if they're not thought through correctly. Secondly, I've come across recently an instance where someone's applied for a new role, and a very large insurance company uses automation and AI to match people who apply for jobs with job roles. And actually, someone applied for a role, didn't get selected even for an interview or shortlisting, and so I got involved just to asked one of the directors who was looking after this side of things, and it was the AI that had deselected them, even though they met all the criteria. So there are risks, and there are things like unconscious bias and bias in these technologies which we need to be mindful of. But for me, it's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for us to improve our digital services. It's a great opportunity for the public sector to do more with less. And it's a great opportunity for our people, our staff, to work on the higher value stuff where they can help and really unblock some of the challenges people have, whereas the AI and the automation can deal with the mundane stuff. So in summary for me, there's a couple of things we need to be mindful of. Yes, embrace it. It's an opportunity. Be aware of the potential threats. Think about your staff. Think about the decision making and the large amounts of data we could process through automation. Think about the interaction with the public. Be aware of the potential bias that could be in there. Be aware of owning the outputs of this. But most of all, it's a risk-based approach, isn't it? Work out where we can save the most money, we can help more people, and we can make a real difference. So yes, the public sector is ready for this technology, and yes, we should be embracing it, and that's why we've set up an AI governance board where in Norfolk County Council, where we're actually looking at it across the whole service. So thank you for the question, and I look forward to any questions on that.
Fantastic, and Kurt, thank you for your insights. Obviously, being ready, having that transition will probably mean that there'll be a procurement process and a way of looking at how to make that capital budget go or stretch as far as it can for intents and purposes, which I suppose links really, really well into our questions for Daryl. So Daryl, if I start with yourself here, how have the changes you've seen in the public sector impacted your advisory procurement side? Obviously, we've got things like IFRS 16 coming in, which I'm sure our listeners will fully understand and need no assistance with whatsoever. And how can Link ensure that the public sector are getting the best value for money?
Thank you, Danny. Good afternoon, everyone. Afternoon, morning still. My name is Daryl Slevin from Link Treasury Services. We are the leading public sector treasury and asset finance advisor, and primarily work with the public sector and about 400 public sector organisations. So that's me. It's a very good question. Over the last number of years, particularly from a procurement perspective, with the Public Contract Regulations 2015, the introduction now of more social value that sits as part of those procurement exercises, there's a greater scrutiny around procurement across the public sector as a whole, particularly when it comes to ensuring that the due process has been followed, that any contracts that are awarded can stand up to any challenges, the robustness of the award process, how it's been scored, all of that kind of stuff. And that has changed the landscape quite significantly. What it has done with the public sector over that period of time is in some ways has elongated procurement processes, but this is where there's been a change across now to more the utilization of existing frameworks that have been established to try and speed up the procurement process, also use bulk buying power from all of those public sector entities using those frameworks. And the likes of Microsoft sit on the CCS framework to be able to call down and procure the actual asset and hardware, etc. itself, or software, whatever it is. It's then a case of actually we move through to the funding side. But to ensure that people have access to find a tender service compliant frameworks that have been established correctly on terms and conditions that are acceptable to all of the people who want to use those, the contracting entities, but also that achieve value for money as part of the framework as well, and have transparency around things like what fees people are charged to use those frameworks, and everything else becomes critical. And we at Link operate a number of frameworks for our clients to use for councils, NHS trusts, housing associations, pretty much anything public sector, but quite uniquely our FCA, Financial Conduct Authority regulated. So we have to disclose everything around that. So transparency is key, but there is far more scrutiny on the procurement process to ensure that things have been done correctly, that they are able to be justified. And again, that follows through into when it comes to looking at how do we fund all of these pieces of expenditure, and funding assets. There are a variety of options, and this is a lot of the work that we do comes around options appraisals to look at what are the best funding options available for the entity. And it differs from each entity depending upon the retention period of their assets, depending on their treasury strategy. If it's a council, they may be looking at internal borrowing, they may look at external borrowing, they may look at leasing. There's a variety there. It could be a capital receipt they might use. It could be use of reserves. Very rarely reserves. There aren't any, quite simply, which Kurt's agreeing with, I can see over there. But also those challenges there with the NHS, it's the cost of capital. Can we reclaim the VAT? Can we not? All of these factors need to be taken into account when undertaking options appraisals, and it differs because treasury strategies and how people borrow, etc., differ from client to client. And as Kurt alluded to earlier, interest rates have been rising where they are at the moment, 5.25. Hopefully, if the economists are right, they're saying that's now the terminal rate, that they won't go any higher than that, and over the next couple of years should then start to fade back. But with the budget pressures facing the public sector, options appraisals become critical to justify what is the best way to fund this. And sometimes it will say buy it outright, and sometimes it will say leasing is a better option. And as Ola alluded to, when you've got assets that have very tangible second-hand values, which means they can second life, which ties into that circular economy, that can actually become quite attractive when built into a financing option. Because if someone says that I will build in 22% value on this in X years' time, and suddenly you're only funding 78% with an element of interest, compared to if you bought it yourself and you're buying it outright, and what do you then want to depreciate it to? It's also utilizing people. If you're buying the assets, do you have the expertise to resell them in the second-hand market? Or if you go to someone such as a CHG who has access to these markets to be able to dispose of them, who is willing to build in that 22%, does that achieve better value for you? And that's the entire idea of an appraisal, to actually look at it, but tailored to each client's specific needs. Aside from that, when you get to the different funding options, if someone says, actually, leasing is an option that we may look to go down, that's fine. But what we've seen and what is coming for councils next year, 1st of April 24, it's already been adopted by the NHS. There's accounting changes that have occurred around IFRS 16, as Danny alluded to. But they also, some people have viewed these as quite problematic and challenging. They're not as bad as people think, but it does give quite a bit of scope for how you can fund assets. So under the new rules, basically everything goes on balance sheet, except if you're a council from the 1st of April 04, because of the nature of the assets that you're looking to acquire, you actually have the freedom to say, do I want it to be revenue spend, or would I like it to be capital and on the balance sheet? And it doesn't matter what type of lease you sign. It's down to how it's accounted for. And we provide quite a lot of advice around this, and advice on procurement projects to say, will it be caught, will it not? But that area, some people are viewing with trepidation. It's actually an area for opportunity when it comes to IT equipment, particularly if leasing is the right option, because it gives you the flexibility within the budgets to say, where do I want the spend to go through? Do I want revenue? Do I want capital? Advising around things like IAS 38 and capitalization of intangibles, that also comes into play, because again, that can assist people with projects where they're looking to do a complete transformation project, but suddenly actually, if this is going through as revenue, I've got a problem here. I can't afford to do it. If I could capitalize it, that might work. There's ways, or sometimes it can be done. And also, going through that and trying to extend asset life, trying to second use that asset becomes quite key as well from a green perspective, as you can imagine. But it's the value for money argument with the budget pressures, the settlements that aren't being given for more than 1 year figures, etc. Utilizing every penny you can to maximize your buying power is just key. And it all comes back to those options appraisals to evidence value for money. But also from a green economy, from a circular economy, making sure, as Ola alluded to, that assets don't get used for X amount of time and then they end up as waste from the we side of things and will go to other areas. So there are people who give assets to schools, etc., once they get to the end of their life, to try and sit there and say, this is helping the economy, it's reducing costs for other people, but also it's circular. And it's trying to tie that into the strategy and the procurement strategy. And we're seeing more and more of it occur across the public sector, which is fantastic. And it takes away the cost of doing nothing, of course. We still have some older approaches where the blue screen of death approach still occurs, I'm afraid, across some public sector bodies. And whilst keeping the asset for an incredibly long time, such as that, from a productivity, a downtime, etc., being able to deal with the new technology, such as AI, if you've got very old equipment, does that help? Not all the time, no. But it comes back to ensuring procurement processes are correct, using the flexibility that the accounting rules now give if leasing is the right option. And if it is the right option, ensuring you use the correct type of framework and structure the transaction correctly on day one. But hopefully that addresses what you were after, Danny.
No, Daryl, that was absolutely spot on. Right, so we've heard from Ola, we've heard from Ben, we've covered sustainability, circular economy, we've heard from Kurt, and the onset of AI and automation and all of the changes that need to happen to make that work. Obviously, Daryl, thank you for your insight into Link and all of the services you can provide to make sure that our public sector clients are actually doing things the right way, with the right guidance and the right advice, which then leads me on to Emma, who has no doubt been listening intently. And I suppose I'm going to give you probably a nice, easy question. And that is, based on what you've heard today from our guest speakers, how can CHG support the public sector to deliver the necessary changes to ensure that digital transformation shouldn't cost the earth? What's the value proposition that we can put in here?
Well, thanks, Danny, and hi, everybody. It's morning still, but only just. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Thank you all in the panel for coming along and actually joining us and going through giving your viewpoints and giving us some very useful insights, certainly from the coalface when it comes to from both Ben and Kurt and what they're actually experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And obviously, same with Ola and Daryl and how they're affected by these decisions that are made elsewhere and how we actually will try and work together. A little bit about myself, if I may, first. I've been with CHG. I like to say I'm new. So if you'd asked Danny first, he would have to have said I've been here a number of years. Whereas I can tell you I've been here 11 years and I'm new. So that should give you some sort of indication around CHG and what we're like and how we are as an organisation. So I work with Danny in the public sector team alongside my colleague Jamie. We also have an education team and a corporate team. So what we don't do is have one size fits all, because that just doesn't work. And for many people, financing, well, it might be a little scary. Might dare say it's a bit of a, oh gosh, that's not me. So again, thank you, everybody. I can think the number of people who have turned up to come to this, to listen to this, and are still here. Thank you. Appreciate the time and for sticking with us on this one. But to answer Danny's question more succinctly, I think actually we take the bits of everything that everyone has said here and help glue them together. So we've known for a long time that if you're using, as Darryl alluded to, older devices to try and use newer equipment such as AI and what's coming, the chances are something will fail. And what gets the blame? It's usually the software, or it might be the hardware, or it might be that you've kind of glued one bit in to fix another one to try and make it last a little bit longer. And actually that true cost of what that is costing you and what you can and can't achieve or do with that now is something that is coming to the forefront, and we're seeing more and more of. I mentioned I work within the public sector team. I'm very pleased to see that public sector seems to be leading the way on this. I know Ben said it's not going quite far enough for him and what he would like to see in terms of what's coming through, but I think it's fair to say that we're leading the way, we're leading the charge. It's certainly all coming from our side. And I think Ola mentioned it too when he went through the residual value side, the opportunity, and it is the opportunity to make sure that you're on top of everything and with everything and doing it in the right way. So we're very pleased to be one of the lessors that are approved by Link and sit on their frameworks and are able to assist people and help them. But actually, it's not just the finance, and it doesn't come out of the box and off the shelf to fix that one particular issue. We have lots of different solutions. And the thing we actually spend a lot of our time talking to customers about is actually asset management. So if you are doing a procurement, whether it's laptops, desktops, whatever it might be, mobile phones, the chances are you're not getting just one. You're probably getting a number of these devices. And once you've got them, you're using them, your users are using them, and then what happens to them? Where do they go? Is it that same linear approach that you've always had of I've suddenly got some budget, let's buy these now and use them, and then hopefully somebody else will use them again? Or are you looking at a more circular approach? If you've joined this webinar, we'd like to think you are thinking of the more circular approach just purely because of your interest in what we're discussing and what we're going through today. But you control that. Where are those assets? What are those assets? Who has that asset? What tag is associated with that asset? How are you going to maintain it and manage that? And I tell you, there is nothing like that ticking clock of you need to get that device back to a lease company to suddenly make you sharpen the mind on where that is and how can I do that? And we're about transparency. And I think that's been mentioned a number of times, certainly from Ola. And again, from the various sides within Darryl and Link and what they do. If you are transparent about what you do and how you work with people and where you are, you'll find it works for everybody. And that's really where we are. Leasing, if I could lose the word lease, I absolutely would. But it is what it is. It is finance. It does provide the glue that sticks all these bits together and makes it all work for you. And actually, you just need to find the right partner to work with to help you to get to what you want to achieve and how you can get there. I've seen there have been a number of polls and various things that have gone through. I don't know if everyone's been able to look at that at the same time as actually doing the presenting and those sort of bits too. But it's interesting to see there are still people that say it's not applicable. It's quite interesting to hear from those guys, I think, if they have any queries about anything you've heard today, anything that we can all try and answer for you in these next few minutes that we've got coming up, just to go through why you feel it's not applicable, where it doesn't fit for you, how is it that the circular model isn't necessarily one that you fit into. I mean, for CHG, we've been doing this for 40 plus years, and the irony is we've always been a circular kind of business because of what we do. We take that equipment back, we remarket it, and it gets another life, and it keeps going and it keeps going, rather than sitting in a drawer, everyone forgets about it, or it just gets pushed along. So because we take that residual value that Darryl mentioned up front, it means that you're getting the benefit of those services immediately without having to do any of the stuff at the end, because we will do that. That's what we do. So that's effectively what we offer in a nutshell, but it is bespoke. So it's going to fit your model, what you want to achieve. One size doesn't fit all. It's not going to be the right thing for everybody, which Darryl will tell you with his options appraisal. But that's really a very quick nutshell overview. But if anybody wants more, we can obviously go through some more details. We can show you Tesma and how it works with our customers. It's our own platform that we created in-house, and it's actually come off of the back of customer feedback. So it's not something we've just created and stuck it on. It's something we've created because we've had that feedback from our customers that they wanted this information, and it started off as a tiny grain, and now it is, forgive the pun, a huge forest of information that people now use on a daily basis in order to run their businesses and to work what they need to work out. So Danny, hopefully that helps to answer your query.
Indeed it does. And I have to say, I need to thank all of our presenters, because having looked at the panel that we had, a topic that is so huge, covering sustainability, covering AI, covering automation, covering procurement, covering leasing, covering asset management, I never believed in the slightest that we would be able to actually achieve that within the timescales that we had, and still have time for questions. Now, I'm going to quickly go through the poll results. As Emma alluded to them earlier on, if we look at sustainability and how important sustainability is, so from achieving net zero and looking at ways to move to a circular economy or IT approach, if we look at that, 53% of the audience responded to say yes, they have plans and actions in place. 11% yes, but we need some help, and 37% saying no, not applicable. If anyone who answered that wanted to provide some further feedback, please do pop it into the Ask Your Questions section. During IT procurement, does your organisation ask for device carbon data for the replacement of equipment? 36 responded yes, and it's something that we ask our suppliers from. 36% responded no, but we would like to include this now, and 29% said it was not applicable. An options appraisal from Link provides an in-depth independent review of leasing versus other finance options. Would this methodology be useful for your organisation? And would you use it? Looking at next IT procurement, I think when this poll landed originally, I think I was wondering what we would get on here, but 20% said yes, we've looked into leasing before. Yes, we're looking into leasing but need more information. And 60% said no, it's not something we're interested in. I'm assuming that 60% who said no, not something we're interested in, are totally au fait with all of the audit and accounting treatments that are coming up. It will be interesting to see if that's the case. And then finally, is asset management a growing concern to your organisation? Now, this one is really interesting because from a public sector point of view, HM Treasury does field asset management as being one of the ways of ensuring that we're protecting public money from a public sector point of view. So it's quite interesting. 71% of you said yes. We have measures in place to help us track our assets. 14% said this is a concern, but we need help. And 14% said no, it's not applicable. Again, I do ask if you have any questions, because we've got a whole 7 minutes left, please put them into the Ask Your Question section. We did have a question earlier on, and I will ask it of Ola. So Ola, Microsoft emissions impacts dashboard is good, but limited. So for example, it only shows a rolling 12 months, and it would be helpful to see this data over a longer period, preferably 3 years and more. I suppose it's more of a statement than a question. What would you like to respond on that, Ola?
I'll do the political response. There's some facts to those things as well. There's one is that the tool has not been out there that much long. You will see a lot of improvements over time. I have been involved slightly around that team when we were developing that tools, and that's like 48 months ago. So, and all the things that they have actually been managed to do within those 12 to 48 months is just incredible. So do expect a lot more to come into that tool, but also the whole cloud for sustainability, where you would then start to be able to incorporate all other things, is very core to how I talked about Microsoft is making sure to get our own house in order. So that's sort of the half political answer to it. Can I add one thing now when I actually got to speak a little bit, and that's a little bit just as a reminder to people listening in as well. Even though you're not thinking of leasing or residual value, use that residual value as a simple KPI, as I talked about. What is actually the value of the thing that we're going to purchase? Even though if I'm not going to resell it, if I'm going to give it to someone else, they are probably super happy that they get something of high value. And again, they can then maybe sell it in their hands to get to second and third life. So use that as your simple KPI inside your organization, even though that you're not looking at leasing today.
No, and a perfect comment, Ola. Perfect comment. Okay, if we don't have any
Yep,
further.
Ben has a couple of points.
Right. Sorry. So Ben.
Yeah, just to chuck in a couple more ideas quickly after hearing everyone else speak, which was really interesting. Thank you very much. So yeah, I guess firstly, it's like sort of manage what you measure type stuff. Cross government, they've been doing sustainable tech baselining since about 2009 as part of greening government commitments. Sadly, we don't do that in the NHS yet, but we are looking to undertake our first cross-system tech baseline at the moment from a carbon angle. And we're also doing some discovery exercises at the moment, looking at cloud carbon and software carbon as well, which is a bit of a deep dive on some specific technical areas, which is really interesting. If anyone wants to find out more about that, please reach out on LinkedIn, what we're up to. But yeah, around the kind of circular stuff, the main drive of today's event, I think we're in a funny space at the moment. We've got black and white policy from government saying that we should be doing this stuff. We've got loads of suppliers who can do it and have like active offers in the marketplace, but we've also got a lot of perceived risk around taking people on and doing some of this stuff around sort of reliability, performance, security, a whole number of things. So to some extent, I think there's a financial and carbon case to scaling circular approaches here, right? But it's partially, I think, a communications challenge that we've got at the moment about how to kind of rapidly accelerate and scale what could become business as usual practices, I think, in the next few years if all the pieces fell in the right place. So yeah, I think there's something big there about bringing the right stakeholders around the table and really unlocking those barriers.
And hopefully facilitation from the people in this room. Ben, I'm down to my last 3 minutes, so I'm just going to say thank you to all of my panel. Again, as I stated earlier on, I'm absolutely gobsmacked that we were able to cram so much in. Really fantastic content, really good input from all of our panelists. I will echo what Ben said. If you do want to find out more, please feel free to reach out via LinkedIn to all of the panel. I'm sure they'd be happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. And obviously that's a way that you can reach all of us to ask further questions if you have them. Hopefully you've all found that really, really useful and very informative. I know I certainly have. One last time, I'd like to thank the panelists, but of course, I'd also like to thank all of you who have taken the time to attend this webinar, who've given up an hour of your day to come and hear what we have to say and what we can do. And I'm going to leave you with one final request, and that's please do search for CHG Meridian UK and find out how we can support you further. So thank you very much. Cheers.